And, how do you settle in as you're stepping up and communications? It's a combination of many things, but let me also tell you that because it got dragged out so long, right? This process of finally electing a speaker and therefore getting sworn in. I mean, it only took him 15 times, right? It meant that there was a lot of legislative work that had to hold off. So this has been a really long week of legislative work.
What do you hope to amplify? It's 400. You get there, and all of you. It's interesting. As I've spoken to Congressman Jackson about it, he said, it's even though you have Republicans and Democrats in the room. He said, there's a basic respect, even when people don't get together in the mobs one on one. You get on because you all went through the same thing to get there. You can be appointed to the Senate, but you got to run for that House seat. And
right.
And it's so there's a kind of there's a grudging respect sometimes for everybody who's in that house. What have you learned since you've been there?
I've learned so much, right? I mean, jokingly around, I've learned how to get to the Capitol from my office.
Okay.
It's funny. It's funny because
wait a minute, that's not a joke. That's serious.
No, it really isn't. A number of the freshman members, we joke about from caucus to our office, we walk together just to make sure that we finally get to our office without a 30-minute, running around the Capitol trying to find how to get to Longworth or Cannon or Rayburn. But I would say to you, look, one of the biggest lessons here also is the importance of those like-minded people that have been elected to Congress who came here, number one, to protect and uplift working families, to stick together, to look at the legislation, to look at what Republicans are proposing, what we are proposing in resolutions, and figure out ways to do this work collaboratively. Very, very clear. I think Rick couldn't have said it more clearly. Corporations in this place attempt to control every single vote. In many ways, every single thing you've seen Republicans come up and talk about this past week has been about taking rights from women, taking rights from working class families, and providing themselves more power so that they can help corporate gain. So this week has been a week of no votes, to be honest. 15 times voting no for McCarthy, but that wasn't just it. Saying no to rules packages that make it easier for insurrectionists like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Greene Taylor to take over our Congress, to introduce legislation or resolutions that really will harm our everyday people and our people of color. No to bills that are going to gut the IRS, making it even easier for ultra wealthy billionaires to dodge tax fairness and get all the tax loopholes they already have. No to GOP resolutions to continue to exacerbate Asian hate crimes. No to GOP witch hunt committees to waste taxpayer dollars while they're attacking Democrats. And no to anti-choice legislation that would be harmful to our healthcare workers, for people who are making personal family decisions on their future and their family. So it's been truly a journey and a realization that the next 2 years, Santita, are going to be extremely difficult. But we must be working together, fighting like hell for our working families, as Republicans attempt to do everything possible to destroy them.
Is there any pathway for you to make headway for, say, there is a tie between immigration and farming, and the family farmer and corporate farms, which are, now Bill Gates owns more land than anybody. What is there a pathway? Is there a way? Is there any conversation that you can have? Well, not just within the Democratic caucus, because if you're not in one of these farming states, you don't. I mean, we respond to what it is that we live around. Is there any pathway to help people see the real pain that our family farmers are in? I mean, we saw during COVID, at the height of the pandemic, they were saying, look, we've got food. We just can't get it from the fields to even the street. you know, and
Yeah,
we've got the farm workers who are struggling. I mean, can you speak
that's
to that?
right.
Because this is what we do in this part of the country. We farm.
No, that's absolutely right. Listen, Tina, I think it's a surprise to some, but when I was in the Illinois legislature, and one of my proudest moments was to become part of a program called the Adopt a Legislator program with the Illinois Farm Bureau. And when the Farm Bureau asked me as a freshman in the state legislature, if you'd partner with us, where would you want to go? I said to them, take me the furthest from Chicago, downstate Illinois, where there is a growing migrant community that is ensuring that we have food on our table and really working with farms. And I want to make sure that I am assigned to that area so that I can, one, advocate for our migrant workers, but really have a clear understanding of what's happening to our farmers every single day. Where am I? Where was I? I was a legislator adopted by Lawrence County, Illinois, the most southern eastern part of the state of Illinois, where Mary Miller is the congresswoman and Darren Bailey was the state senator. Santita, I could not have found more commonalities in the farmers and in the people that I talked to there than I could have as I talked to Latino people about the challenges, or our own people here in Chicago, about challenges on economic development, challenges on workforce, difficulties with housing stability. I found so much in common with folks that are struggling every single day to make sure that their farms are up and running and are able to get the food, right, to our neighborhoods, to our stores. And what I find is that agriculture perhaps is the one thing that we could find some kind of commonality around. Workforce in farming right now is truly a crisis. And while you see immigrant families being scapegoated through Republican jargon and talking points, it is the migrant workers that are keeping these farms open in many of our states. And I think this is a place where we can have some real conversations about where we could work together, if there's a place to work together.
We're talking with Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, newly elected Congresswoman, endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Chuy Garcia, Congressman Chuy Garcia, who's number one according to most polls as we go into this mayoral race. And we're talking with her about what she hopes to amplify, the issues that she hopes to amplify, and maybe work across the aisle, as you did. I mean, as you said, no, take me away from Chicago when you were a state representative. I want to see how the state lives, because when you did that, did that enable you to say, okay, well, maybe I can talk to someone who might be Republican, who might be from downstate, who might think Chicago's a big bad wolf, and maybe we can find points of commonality. Does that really work?
Santita, as crazy as it sounds, to an extent it does. So, when I say that to you, I went down to Lawrence County at least 5 times in my time in the legislature. And then I've had annual dinners with them for around Christmas to really talk about how we are catching up. But I didn't just go there. I asked the farmers to come to Chicago. I asked them to come to Humboldt Park, to Westtown, to Wicker Park, to Ukrainian Village, to Belmont Craig, and to Avondale. And it was so important and eye-opening for them to also, farmers that perhaps only came to Chicago once a year for the Illinois Farm Bureau annual conference, to not just go downtown Chicago, to come to our neighborhood, to come to Humboldt Park and Belmont Cragen and really see the challenges of our everyday people, of our immigrant communities, of housing insecurity because increased rents. And what they said to me was, I never really understood when folks talked about debating the challenges of Chicago, really what some of those are until you brought us into your neighborhood. And it's so important we do that mutual connection. And in some cases, one of my closest friends in Lawrence County, Glenn and Dennis, two farmers, one grows soybeans and other grows corn, he said, I've never really had a conversation about immigration with a dreamer until I talked to her husband here in Lawrence County. And it started changing the face for them, how we talk about immigration. We have to be courageous enough to see humanity and start having real conversations out of a place of compassion. And yes, still out of a place of courage to stand up for our people.
What about housing? I mean, you see Karen Bass, who was the former head of the Congressional Black Caucus. In fact, she was on the short list for President Biden's vice presidential candidates. Well, now she's mayor of Los Angeles, and she said, my top initiative will be dealing with housing. Everyone knows that California, from the rooter to the tutor, from Northern California to Southern California, is extremely expensive. And now Chicago's extremely expensive. Detroit is, as it comes back, it's squeezing poor people out. And we go on and on and on. What do we do about the unhoused? Is there anything that you think, any movement we might be able to make on that?
You know, I talked to you a lot about the no's this week. What I didn't tell you about was some of that internal work that I've had an opportunity to start doing with a number of my colleagues. Leading the forefront this week on this has been Congressman Jamal Bowman out of New York, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, that we all know, out of Massachusetts, two areas that also see the housing crisis that we're living in. We drafted a letter to the Biden administration really talking about housing crisis and the importance for us to prioritize the work we do through the administration, certainly given where we are with our Congress, to really protect our renters, protect our families who are experiencing homelessness. So there's a letter that we drafted with a number of recommendations. But here's the thing, Santita, you said it. The price gouging we are seeing from developers, from some of these people who in this pandemic received directly, right, from the federal government, the dollars from the rent relief program. And now that the rent relief has gone away, are now telling their tenants, well, you can't pay the $2,000 that you were paying, but now it's time to renew the lease and I need you to pay $2,500. This is the quickest way of displacement of people, and we are seeing more people at risk of homelessness than we have ever seen before. So in that letter that we sent to the administration, we said we have to do something to really address the rent gouging we're seeing across the country. We have to also figure out what we're doing around rent protection. Mm-hmm. The number of people that are seeing themselves now in court. And there are things about not being able to pay rent, but there's also all sorts of other loopholes that are evicting people. And look, I'm in Washington, D.C., a block from the Capitol. I see tent cities and people literally on the concrete trying to build up their tent because they can't afford to live in D.C. If we don't have housing security, we can't possibly believe that our children are able to learn in the right conditions, when they're going to school, because we know that the fastest growing community that's addressing homelessness is families. The average age is really 10 years old, not 65. That we can't really address healthcare. There's an intersection between housing, healthcare, education, mental health, and safety. It has to be a priority for us.
She's my congresswoman too. How about that? Congresswoman Delia Ramirez. Oh, I'm claiming you. Yes, I am.
That's right.
You're my girl. Made me lose my composure on the Capitol, but I was so glad to see you there wearing that pen. Yes, I did. If my father looked at us like we were both nuts.
And it was so good to see you. I had gone through 4 days of, lots of craziness in that House floor. It was so good to see a familiar face that I love so much. So
I love you. And know that this show and this station, we are your home. Whenever you want to put issues out there, amplify an issue, just call us. Call us in the middle of the show, and we'll bring you on. You know that.
Thank you, Santita. I'm looking forward to it.
And give Aaron and Faye and the whole crew all my love.
I sure will.
Congresswoman,
we'll very, very soon.
Oh, absolutely. Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, everybody, making history, making change. Dr. Max Wolf in just a few minutes on the Santita Jackson Show. Come on, board operator. Let's get out of here. Congresswoman?
Hey, Santita.
No. Girl, I'm so glad to hear your voice. So proud of you.
It's so good to be on with you.
Oh, I mean, look, I just love you. And just know that, please let Faye, and I think I have Erin Connolly. I was going to try and let her come and say hello to you, but can we speak to Erin real quick? Because, Erin makes all things Congresswoman Daly Ramirez. She mentioned your name every day. She finds a way. Peanut butter and jelly and Daly Ramirez.
It is my heart.
We love you. So proud of you. Don't know what to do, but how your parents are doing okay?
My parents are doing good. My parents dislike Kevin McCarthy. Santita, my mom took off 3 days off of work, no pay. She's a home care worker, but she works for an agency that if you don't work, you don't get paid.
Oh yeah.
And, she took the time to be here with her daughter. And she's like, I'm going back home, and you tell Kevin McCarthy that I'm going to send them those 3 days, the worth of wages that I lost because he and his games, trying to become speaker, robbed me from my wages while I tried to stick around to see my daughter get inaugurated.
But you know what?
Miss Jackson, we have Dr. Wolf on.
Thank you. Love you, Dr. Max Wolf. We need to have a people's inauguration, and you know what? That should be part of your narrative too. Because you have you're right. Living the American life. You are.
I am.
So, every day, and you have my full support. And there's no one. Well, we're almost neck and neck. Erin Connolly. You do not have a bigger booster, and we love you, and we're so proud of you. And I'll see you on Monday, Erin. And if you want to bring your parents, let me know to the Push Excel luncheon and breakfast. Okay?
Yes, I will talk to them. Thank you, Santita.
Absolutely. So let me know who you want to bring, and Erin and I are going to work all of that out because Erin, of course, is coming also.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
I'll let you know.
Sending you much love.
Have a good day, ladies.
God bless you. Sending you much love.
God bless. Thank you. Bye.
Poor Erin. What did you say? I have one more thing to do on Monday morning? Yes.
Oh, please. I'm honored to attend. I cannot wait.
But so, let's lock down who she's bringing, and we'll get them seated. Okay? But I want her with Reverend.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, we have got Dr. Max Wolf talking to us about inflation. Oh, all these wonderful topics make us feel so good. Stay right here, Erin.
It is good news this morning.
Max, you're not right.
Actually, it's a good print. No, the print is good for inflation smart.
Okay, well, help me.
Just kidding.
I'm just trying to figure out how it is that
I got these numbers 3 days ago from Congressman Santos anyway.
What are they going to do with this guy?
30 seconds.
I like the theater of the absurd where we pretend he's radically different than the other people, so he lied about different stuff.
What I mean, but I'm wondering what is his connection to Brazil? Because he got a whole lot of money. And when I think of Bolsonaro, there's a lot of big money in Brazil, and he has. Yeah. You just don't get to Brazil. Yeah, and make me sound paranoid. I don't care. I want to know what the deal is with him.
All right, stand by.
All right, we're coming in. My board operator is about to have a fit.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Come on, everybody. She was right.
I'm just organized. That's all.
I love it.
I'm just on top of it.
You become my manager.
This is
You go, board operator.
Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you on WCBT 820 the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, hosting the January 6th mayoral debate on all of our platforms. Patty Vasquez, Joan Esposito, Santita Jackson, we will all be moderating that discussion with the candidates. You don't want to miss it, everybody. It's going to be fantastic. Can you believe it's been 4 years already since Lori Lightfoot, Mayor Lightfoot, took office? Well, we might have a runoff, but the voting is in February. That's right. So we are on top of it here on WCPT and AM 950 Radio, my home in Minneapolis, St. Paul, sending all of you much love on this Thursday. On this Thursday, January 12th, 2020. How does that say 2022 is 2023? So let's talk about inflation, everybody. I mean, we just spoke with Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, the first Latina to go to Congress from the Midwest, as she's looking at the unhoused, the economic insecurity that we're all facing, as she's looking at the challenges facing our farmers, from the people who work on the farms to the family farmers who own them. Economic insecurity is driving so much of the social unrest, and it's not a surprise. It was predicted that this would happen some years ago. And we're looking at inflation. Inflation is expected to have declined in December, but still people are feeling it. Dr. Max Wolf, of course, he is here every Thursday at 7:30. And so I want you to talk to us as we're watching the employment rate fall. But according to this Forbes article, job quality is deteriorating. The Fed says, okay, we're going to adjust the interest rates. It's going to drive unemployment, but we'll get better. How do we get better with fewer people working? Where do you want to begin today? You said you're going to start.
Yeah, well, so the news fresh off the tape, so 8:30 a.m. Eastern release from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, and it's probably the most widely used measure of inflation. So when people are talking about inflation, they're usually talking about either the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or the CPIU, the Consumer Price Index for urban America. There's a slightly different one for rural America, but urban includes suburban, so it's where the vast majority of Americans live and purchase things. And that's something called the core inflation rate. So the two ones usually here are inflation, which is CPI, and then core inflation, which is the Consumer Price Index removing food and energy. That doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people who spend a lot of money on food and energy.
Yes.
Food and energy does move a lot. It's very volatile, so it can have big month-to-month changes. So if you take it out, you get the sort of the trend, the smoother version of where things are headed, and so they often do that. The hope was that inflation would be very low or negative month over month, and in fact it was. So month over month. However, people should keep in mind that's November to December, not December to January, right? We won't have that. So this is always kind of backward looking by a month or so. So it is backward looking information, but we have seen a real slowing of inflation. Partly, unfortunately, as you mentioned before, that's because the wages really didn't keep up when the prices surged. So wages did increase, but they didn't increase as much as prices. And so you can see that a lot of households across the income spectrum, by the way, are having a lot of hard times in terms of matching what things cost, often the same things they've historically bought against their earnings. And that takes different forms with wealthier and poorer people, but it's really slammed into the housing market, those interest rates, and a little bit of a sense of foreboding about the economic future here. And it certainly hit purses and pocketbooks and been the cause of lots of stressful, difficult decisions and conversations around dinner tables or wherever people have those chats in their house. And so we can see that partly in surging levels of debt on credit cards and some other instruments, and in a number of other areas. So we can see this is it's hit pretty hard, but because the wages didn't keep up, it does take some of the wind out of the sail. So between raising the interest rates, which the Fed has done to slow the economy, and wages not keeping up, things have begun to really slow down. Again, to your also point you made, we learned last Friday that the employment picture remained pretty strong. So we're sitting at around 3.5% headline unemployment. Lots of issues with how we measure that, but that notwithstanding, that's about as low as it's been in 50 years.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf about inflation. I mean, now eggs, Dr. Wolf, you have to put it down here where the goats can get it. Eggs are out of reach. Increasingly, people cannot afford housing to rent, let alone purchase a home. And we're not able to buy like eggs, groceries. I mean, this is, and I don't see anyone
But to give you a
really.
good example of the
Yes, please. I don't see anyone speaking to that because people are hurting out here. These are not just numbers, on a page. These are people.
And look, obviously, some people have a job or a life where eggs are a really big portion of their spend, but almost everybody, the largest item they spend on is their housing, right? So housing is going to be about 30-40% of people's budgets. It's a huge chunk of the budget. And, outside of some special cases, eggs are not going to be 1% of the budget. So the impact on the country and a lot of households of eggs, while it's meaningful and probably heavy psychological value to them, to being able to afford basic protein or teach your kids healthy food and stuff is a big deal. But the percentage of your spend that goes to eggs, again, I'm sure there are some special cases, but generally the percentage that goes to eggs versus the percentage that's going to go to living inside is going to be way off in favor of living inside. And living inside is unaffordable for most people in the United States because the interest rates were so low for so long. Because when people buy a house, they say, what can I afford? And they don't tend to break down the portion of it that's the interest payment on the house and the portion of it that's the price of the house. So if it's cheaper on the interest side, they just buy more house.
Mm-hmm.
And people have been doing that basically for 25 years. So it's created a lot of dislocations in the housing market. And again, it's always really the wages too. For working Americans, the bottom 70% or so, 80% of Americans, so about 4 out of 5, where their wages are against cost is what matters, not just cost. Right? So if your wages are going up 10% and the price of eggs is going up 8%, eggs are cheaper every year. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though the actual sticker price of the eggs is up. But if you're earning more each year by a larger increase on the eggs, you kind of come out ahead, right? It's the same reason that buying gas is traumatic to everybody, but it's meaningful to lower income people and people with long commutes.
Yes.
Right? Because it's just the way it filters into our lives is different. One reason that we spend a lot of time studying housing is that really doesn't vary much. So for almost everyone, even pretty affluent people, housing is just this monumentally large piece of the spend, whether that's a rent or a mortgage, right? And then the other issue we've had is that rents have really gone up, right? And that's for a host of reasons.
I need you to answer this question for me because you have a lot of discussions, some of them factual, some of them not, but there certainly is a lot of speculation. What? Well,
some factual conversations now. Wow, okay.
Well, you know what I don't do? I don't use the term conspiracy theorist only because I know it was constructed by the CIA to stop dissent behind the Kennedy assassination and behind the King assassination and Malcolm X's assassination, Robert Kennedy. Whenever you deviate from a standard line, you're not called a dissenter, you're called a conspiracist, which is insulting to me. But, but a lot of people are coming up with a lot of different theories. But just help us start here. What is the Federal Reserve? Who are they? And what role do they play in inflation? Because everyone goes hog wild when the head of the Fed says, look, I'm going to have to hike the interest rates, and that's going to hike unemployment, but that's going to make us better. And people are like, huh? The Fed, what is it?
So the Federal Reserve is about 110 years old, and it's been the focus of intense and sometimes really creative, if a little bit off, conspiracies from the very beginning. Even if the term conspiracy theory had to wait 60 years into the life of the Fed, it was certainly happening, whatever it means, around the Fed. So look, most countries have a central bank, and that central bank regulates the financial parts of the economy, principally the cost of borrowing money, right? I like to teach this. I teach it the price of renting money. So all an interest rate is the rental cost of money. I think that calms this conversation down for people. Like, we know that rent is what it costs someone else's apartment for a while, right? And to use someone else's money for a while. And his mental and physical efforts for a while. Prices, right? Interest rate's a price. Rent is a price. wages are a price, right?
Mhm.
So what the Federal Reserve's job is to be the central bank of the United States. For a host of reasons, we often have conspiracy theories or elaborate ideas, not all of them factually based, of what governments do, and we're uncomfortable with governments. So we were a little bit late to having a modern central bank, doing this only in the beginning years of the 1900s, around 1913, 1914. And we didn't call it the Bank of the United States, even though everybody else kind of does that. There's a Bank of England, the Bank of China, Central Bank of Germany, the Bank of France, which kind of gives you a hint, right?
Mhm.
For a host of reasons, we call it the Federal Reserve Bank. And it's quasi-public and quasi-private. We have a sort of elaborate, more market-oriented version, but it is still our central bank. Because it is our central bank, it has some core functions, and it has regional offices, 13 of them, around the U.S., right? It's headquartered in D.C., but the main office is in New York, because New York is the banking and financial capital of the United States. Very much so historically, and still true. And the Bank of New York, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, does two things all the other banks don't. They conduct all the international interactions between the U.S. central bank and other central banks, and they do all the market interactions, buying and selling bonds principally in the markets, which are also based in New York, right? So there's regional banks, there's a headquarters, there's 12 regional banks, there's a headquarters, and what they do is they determine how much money is in circulation. So you have a cheat sheet about what the Federal Reserve does, I hope anyway, in your wallet or in your pants pocket, which is every single dollar bill, $5 bill, $10 bill, $20 bill, $50 bill, $100 bill says across the top Federal Reserve note. What you call cash is actually a Federal Reserve note. And only the Federal Reserve has the right to destroy that note, those notes, or to create those notes. And in so doing, they influence the supply of money in circulation. So every piece of money you've ever had, unless it was counterfeited, was made by the Federal Reserve. And even if it was counterfeited, unless it was made with a crayon, it'll say Federal Reserve note across the top. And that's what it actually is. You just call it cash money. Okay? So they determine is in circulation, and they set benchmark interest rates. They say this is about what it should cost to borrow. And they do that because they give the lowest interest rate to banks. The banks can borrow from them at a low rate and then lend to the public at a much higher rate, right? So banks can borrow now at about 3%, 3.5%. And obviously anyone who's listening who's gone looking for a loan probably hasn't seen that kind of number for a while, right? And the Federal Reserve set this up to set a benchmark to influence the amount of money in circulation, to set what it costs to rent money. If it's cheaper to rent money, people rent more money and they buy things, consumers, or they invest in businesses and hire more people. If it becomes more expensive to borrow money, then people buy less, businesses spend less, and the economy contracts, gets smaller. And one form that takes is generally at least less hiring and often headcount reductions or people losing their jobs, and so an unemployment rate that would go up.
So when they say that they're hiking interest rates and more people as a result will be unemployed, how does that work? I mean, how do we have an economy that could conceivably work better with fewer people working, people who need money? Or am I misreading
this is where it gets. No, this is where it gets a little more tricky. So the Federal Reserve doesn't hire and fire people.
Right.
They set the price of money, and then firms, private for-profit industry, respond to those prices, right? But part of what's sitting behind all this is modern economics, and modern economics is the theory that prices order behavior. If I want to change the behavior of a group of people, one way to do that is to change the prices, right? If I want people to do more of something, I lower the price if they're going to buy it. If I want them to do less of something, I raise the price, right? So think of it partly what happens when you raise the interest rate is you're raising the price of building a new factory or adding a new office or buying a new building. And so those things will happen a bit less. And that will translate into the economy as less employment growth or unemployment. It could be either, right? It could be what they're trying to do is slow the demand for labor, so that there isn't firing, but that there's a lower pace of hiring. But historically, when you try to slow the pace of something, you run the risk of stopping it or reversing it. And often the Federal Reserve has had that issue. They've tried to come in to slow down an economy, and they've slowed it more than to zero, right? So if you slow hiring, you could slow it to zero. That means, unemployment stays the same, or you can slow it beyond that, and then you actually have a contraction. The most controversial part of your question, there is no answer for, by the way. So when you say, hey, does this make the economy better? It makes prices more stable. And the Federal Reserve of the United States has a twin mandate, two things it's supposed to do by constitutional charter. Price stability, which means prevent there being runaway inflation or heavy inflation, and prevent deflation, which is also problematic when prices fall, right? So keep price stability, and this is the interesting part of the dual mandate, try to keep us at or close to full employment. So they're supposed to maximize or keep as high as possible the price stability and the number of employed people. And it gets kind of dicey when those two things are at could cost purposes, right? And whether it's better for the economy to have more inflation but have lower unemployment or not, like is price stability more important than unemployment? Honestly, that depends on who you ask. We don't know for sure. And it's not clear, but it's very clear that it affects different segments of society differently. Unemployment tends to hit lower income people quite a bit harder, right? Although price instability is bad for people in general as well, including older people on fixed income and anyone whose wages don't keep up with the price increases. So they're both problematic. It's just which is worse probably depends on who you ask in terms of who in the society and also which economists. There isn't a clear answer to that in economics. Although there is the following, which has been under the sort of so-called neoliberal era, there's been a heavy preference to keep inflation really low at the cost of higher unemployment. And that has coincided with rising inequality.
Can fair employment and full employment coexist?
Well, so the problem with that is, and this is not to be critical of a good question, it is not really clear in economics what either of those terms mean.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well,
So in other words, if you tell me like how many ounces are in a pound, we can kind of have a conversation and we kind of have an answer to work toward, right?
but
tell
that
me
to me is a
what is
problem in
full
economics, that fair, which is, to me, livable wages, prosperity wages. Because my father often says, look, in slavery, we had full employment. So I think we have to have a bigger goal than full employment, because in slavery you've got that, and with indentured servitude you have full employment. People out here can't get their kids they're having to choose between driving to work and driving their kids to school, right? I mean, the economy is just not working for most Americans right now. It's just not.
Agreed. So when they say full employment, just for the record, we tend to constrict it to voluntary employment. So I think there is a big difference between voluntary and involuntary employment. Obviously, I'm sure we agree. Just the point is,
I don't know, because I don't know, the mass resignation kind of people said, I'm not going back to what I left before the pandemic, right?
I agree. Right, but there's a standoff because the notion of the sort of bad work environment, low paid job is I can starve you out, sucker. These are the terms. And the general public is, well, I'm getting used to being hungry. That's called a standoff, right? And that is in the context of some kind of voluntary labor. Now, there can be an effort to make it involuntary, right? So what I'm saying may sound very conservative to people because they're not used to this framing of it, but it's actually just policy economics. So think of it this way. If I'm right and starve them out or win better terms is the big struggle. I mean, that's also called class struggle by some people. It's a feature of a market economy with inequality. Might make some people uncomfortable to say that. It's not interesting that it's going on. But it's a fact. We can call it all kinds of different things, but it's a fact. And then the other thing is, think about the questions it asks, which you're not used to. It's policy economics, which means every effort to cut workers' protections or wages is an effort to force you into lower wages and worse conditions, right? And every effort to raise those conditions, not just for you, but for everybody in the labor market, strengthens your hand. And that's a way to understand these debates about austerity that you're about to see, because that's what's coming, right? But that is a feature of an economy where does it work for the average person? This is not to give it, put words in anyone's mouth. I don't think that's a question on a lot of policymakers' lips.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there are none. There are folks who do say this, and there are folks who've said this a long time, and plenty of folks to admire for their courage on the subject. But generally, labor and industrial policy and work policy in the United States, I think you'd be hard put to show that, hey, does this work for the average person, is an acid test that's normally applied. Does this work to keep profits up? Does this work to keep growth up? Those tend to be more the decisions, right? And again, who sits at the table and asks the questions always has more than a little bit to do with what questions get asked. So this is the argument, I think, for inclusion.
Absolutely. I mean, because I'm trying to figure out how we can grow the economy and grow people and in prosperity as well. It just seems like that's never been quite factored in. And
We have a caller.
well, just who do we have very quickly? Because I know I've got about 2.5 minutes. Well, let's
Ted
just bring up our caller.
Bensonville. Okay.
Is it Ted?
Yes.
Good morning, you guys. I know this is kind of looking from above, but here are 3 things I predict you're going to see, because really
I've got inside of a minute for you, Ted. Stay right. Go on.
Okay. All right. Here are the 3. The powers that be know that we need more people to compete with China. So you are going to see lip service to immigration, but you're going to see people continue to be let in because we need them. You're going to see fights against abortion because we need those people. You're going to see fights to take away Social Security because we need those people. Everybody needs to go back into the work pool for us to compete against China. That is what I believe those at the top think and see.
Hold on. Stay right there, Ted. I've got about a minute and a half. Dr. Wolf, what do you think?
It's an interesting theory. Certainly none of us know the answer. I think that Chinese sort of polity and economy is going through some pretty major changes and convulsions now, a sudden shift in COVID policy, major shifts in trade policy. I certainly hope on some level that Ted is correct, that there's a big demand for labor. Tends to be the view from where I sit. It doesn't mean that I know more than anyone else, is that there's another mass wave of AI-based mechanization coming. And while I do think competing with China is front and center, I think Ted is 100% right on that. I think we're going to need fewer people to run the economy the way we've run it historically because of technologies. And I think it's much more exciting for me to think about what freeing those people up to be productive, to fix the environment, to take care of each other, because we certainly have done a terrible job at taking care of each other and the environment, to the point of now real social unrest and psychological damage. So I think there's a lot we could do with that labor, but I think we're going to have to figure out social priorities. And there I do think the social priority will be disciplining labor, unfortunately. And I think there's going to be, we're in the beginning innings of a long, bitter fight here about working conditions and wages.
Well, and I think, and getting our philosophies together, because indeed, one of my listeners, Tommy Smith, points out that, John Kennedy, our president, who was murdered in the middle of the street, was pushing back against the Fed. I mean, there are a lot of questions. That's why I said I wanted to, one day I want you to come on and talk about that, because he, in the June before he was killed, said that he wanted to expose these secret councils in that incredible speech that he gave at American University. And so, there are a lot of questions, and I'm so glad that we have someone so compassionate, so brilliant, so skilled in the economic space. Dr. Max Wolf, I'm going to be on you until you write that book. How about that?
Well, I would love to meet this special economics guest that you have sometimes.
I love this man.
I deeply appreciate it.
I'll just tell him no. Love him so much. Board operator, thank you for a great show. Morning Stars, thank you for being patient as StreamYard went in and out on me today. Love you, everybody. God bless you. See you tomorrow, God willing. Board operator, thank you for a great show.
My pleasure.
Yay. Dr. Wolf.
Yep.
All righty, daddy. Woofy, woofy,
How are you?
woofy.
How was the inaugural?
We had to leave just as he was, we left half a day, Friday afternoon. And then he was sworn in, in the middle of the night, Friday night, early Saturday morning.
Why was it the middle of the night?
Yeah, but like 2:00 in the morning.
Is it always like that? Or?
Yeah.
I thought it was like a big ceremony during the day.
No, they had a CBC ceremony, the Congressional Black Caucus. But the official swearing in took place late Friday night, early Saturday morning. About 2:00 in the morning on Friday. On
Is that
Saturday
normal
morning.
or is that some dysfunction thing?
Well, look, they were horse trading, I tell you that. They were doing that.
That's on that speaker stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was very, very real. And we were up on the Hill every day. And, it was what it was. And, and of course, all of the congressmen and congresswomen were tethered to the Hill because you had to run back, when they called you back into session. I mean, it really, a lot of people don't know it's an honor to be there, but it's a lot of tedious work. Yeah. Well, it's just a lot.
Seems like it was a simple vote, right? For Jeffries, didn't seem controversial.
Well, yeah, you held the caucus together, but I had someone who was on, Dwight McKee, who was on yesterday. He put forth a point that I think was really an exciting thought. That he said, look, they should have cut a deal. Maybe let them peel off some Democrats and done some horse trading, not to end the vote, but to to have some chips.
It was the obvious choice, right? Big difference.
Well, I mean, they could do a lot of things, but we don't have a democracy yet, and so that's something that we have to fight for. Because if the majority ruled, Hakeem Jeffries would have been the speaker.
Yeah,
but no, you continue to
bumped into him once or twice in New York, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
He seems like a pretty well put together, thoughtful fellow. I just don't know him that well, but yeah, he always comes off well when you meet him, and he has a good reputation here.
Well, and that is wonderful. He's he's
New York, almost no one has a good reputation, so it's really impressive.
Well, he and my brother have gotten on quite well. He's been very, very kind to Jonathan, and for that I'm grateful. Very, very grateful.
Yeah.
So, well, you know what? I'm going to run out of here because I'm going to.
Adjustment too. Right?
What you say, hon?
I'm sure there's an adjustment if you're a new congressperson from any party of any
reach out to Jonathan. Reach out to Congressman Jackson. Reach out to him. I know he'd love to hear from you.
You think he needs more bad advice from someone who has no idea what they're talking about?
Just call him, Matt.
If so, I am ready to go. I am ready. Born ready.
Call him. I know he
am Congress. I'm going to show up as Congressman Santos and do some voting.
Oh,
By the way, I'll tell you one thing that's pretty funny. Everyone I knew in finance, we all knew he had never worked in finance when he took his campaign picture with a sweater under his boot. I can't tell you how many people are like, this guy is not real. And you're like, what do you mean? They see a picture, like, what is this, picture day at a Catholic school? Like, what's he doing with this sweater?
I mean, just explain to me how he happened. I mean, and now the Nassau County GOP, they're saying like, oh my gosh, we disowned him. I'm like, y'all.
Not the best look for them. I can see why they're not interested in the association.
It's awful. The whole thing is just awful.
But when he went over and sat with Gates and Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff, you realize he was the person with the most integrity who's done the least damage to the group. He's also the only person there who, while he may be a criminal, he's not a sex offender. I'll give him that. So he's not hanging out with sex offenders, Maybe the bar's low enough.
I just, you know what? I
think I'd put him up for speaker.
I guess you can.
He'd be a good speaker. Because think about all the experience he has. Whatever you need, he's got it. That's the best part. He's whatever ethnicity he's talking to. He's got whatever experience you need. That's what we need, a real Mr. Fix-It.
Well,
It's time.
because he was biracial. I'm like, what? Are you serious
Well,
right
he
now?
doesn't pay his rent. Apparently, nobody knows pays rent. That's interesting.
Oh my.
He's part of he's like a radical rent abolitionist. It looks like, at least personally for himself.
Really? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I want to know what his
Like,
connection to Brazil is, because I think that there is one. I really do.
I don't know if that's where the money comes from. By
Yeah,
the way.
yeah.
So I think you're speaking of the $700,000 loan.
No, the millions.
Network gave the campaign.
The millions that he
Okay.
has. Like, okay, who are you really? Does anyone care? I'd like to know who he is. Like, for real. I would. And I think we all should. He's sitting in the U.S. House of Representatives. As Americans, I think we should all
Certainly,
be
his
concerned.
constituents have a right to know, right? If you voted for this guy, and
Look,
he's
I'm a
representing you.
constituent because I'm an American. And if someone
Yeah.
who is unvetted is sitting in that body that belongs to all of us, that's a problem. Period. I don't know who
I
he
think the
is.
local press maybe didn't do a great job of vetting this guy too much either.
Oh, please. You know what? There was a big a big F on everybody's forehead. Are you serious? Are we
So if you
vetting
are
them?
covering
How?
the speed, I know there's been a lot of the newspapers, and this may be an example of why that hurts us, right? But if you're a local journalist covering this fellow campaign, it looks like there were some interesting facts that would have made for quite a successful story, probably, that went unreported.
Of course, Max. But that lets you know it delegitimizes the so-called press. I mean, they're not serious. This is awful. But it so much is being exposed to these days that it's amazing.
Are you not going to endorse him for the re-election? Is that what you're saying?
All right. Okay.
I was going to ask on his
He's
behalf. if you
got
would endorse him.
jokes. Yeah. Okay.
You're not endorsing him. Oh my God.
Well,
Seems premature. He's barely had a chance to do his turn.
he's got jokes.
I mean, it's not so clear he's going to get a chance to be a congressman, really, right? Like it looks like he might get run out here.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
He might only still be there because that seat isn't so safe. Maybe.
Hey, that's right. That's the reason they're keeping him in, because it's a flippable seat. They flipped the seat. That's how he got it. So, but all of
Yeah,
this.
but it's not so clear that it wouldn't flip back if you had a special election.
You know what? Potatoes, tomatoes, tomatoes. These people are playing games here. In the meantime, you've got unhoused people all over the country. You have people who are facing eviction all over the country. You have people who are not eating, who are hungry all over the country. We got problems.
Yep.
While the corporations
I
are eating us alive.
I think we shouldn't call it homelessness anymore. We should call it free range people. Sounds better.
Oh my gosh. Are we going to have Soylent Green where we start eating them? This is crazy.
I'm not sure there's a huge demand for that, but
I don't know. This is crazy. But you know what? Let me run out of here. I'm going to run. But reach out to my brother today, please. I know he'd love to hear from you. And I want to introduce you to his chief of staff so you all can be in touch.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Okay, sweetie.
All right, well,
How's
thanks for
the...
having me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, give them a big hug and kiss from me.
Will do.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love y'all. See you tomorrow.